All right, so most of you are local here. Washington is an interesting place. What I'm going to be talking about this morning is the blue zones. And as far as states, there's not a whole lot of difference. There is a minor difference. Anyone know which state is the healthiest?
North Dakota.
It's not North Dakota, but that's a good guess. It is Colorado. How did you know that? It is. You'd think that they would have a problem because of the hypoxia, right? They're too high. Has anyone gone from here to like Denver or something like that? And you go for a hike and you're like, man, I am out of shape. But hopefully, after tonight, you will be able to learn some simple habits that all of us can do to live to be 100. I just want to thank Ron and Edel. I've known them for, I think, longer than anyone else here in the building, maybe. I think so, maybe for 10 years, maybe. I don't know, maybe more than that, I'm not sure. And a special welcome to Hannah. Thank you. I met Hannah on the plane, if you can believe that. So she's like, oh, I live in Kirkland. I'm like, oh, are you speaking in Kirkland? That's pretty funny. So hopefully you will enjoy and take stuff away that's actually practical. But what I first want to start out with is something that my grandfather said. Now, my grandfather was always giving me a hard time about preventive medicine. He would say, oh, you know, great-grandma, she smoked, she drank, and ate pork sausage every day, lived to 109. Yeah. So is that the case? Is it all just genetics? What do you think I said to him? I said, well, she didn't do all that. She'd live to 149. Certainly genetics is a component, right? But I think there's something intrinsic about the search for longevity, the search for eternal youth. Ponce de Leon searched for a physical fountain of youth many, many years ago, but I don't think that the search ended with the death of Mr. Leon. We still are searching for the fountain of youth even today, and with our modern technology, we just search in different ways, if that makes sense. With the economic downturn of 2008, my colleagues in plastic surgery saw no dip in their incomes, and their incomes are not covered by insurance. It's all cash. Is that search for youth, search for longevity, is it all vanity, perhaps? People might say, oh, well, I would never go under the knife to make myself look younger, but might you get a little Botox, maybe? I know some nurses where they don't actually get the treatments themselves, but they get the leftovers from treatments that are for the patients. I don't know about the sterility of that, but certainly I'm sure they switch needles. But maybe you wouldn't get Botox, but would you color your hair? You know, wash the gray out or something like that? Would you dye it a little bit? I don't know. Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. Or maybe you wouldn't do that. Maybe you just touch up a little of the wrinkles, maybe. So is it all just vanity? And, you know, the guys are like saying, oh, I'd never do that. But did you know that men use a lot of supplements, right? Men use a lot of supplements to be stronger, longer, younger. So when we look at our desire for youth, our desire for longevity, is it all just media? Is it all just in our heads? Well, let's take a look at it. When you look at our lives, it seems to follow the same pattern. No matter what race we're from, no matter what level of education, what country, we all seem to follow the same pattern of infancy, youth, adulthood, and aging. And when you contemplate what has been the end of the vast majority of us, it can be very depressing. But there is hope. I believe when you look at the human body, particularly the human brain, you find an interesting phenomenon. When you look at the human brain, you find a very, very inappropriately large capacity. Now, what does that mean? That means that when you look at the average person who dies, they have not filled most of this organ. Did you know that? Any guesses as to the percent that the average person has filled of their hard drive by the time they die? It's less. It's about 5. Only the greatest of our race, the Einsteins, the Schweitzers, have gotten to like 8. Doesn't that seem funny to you? Doesn't that seem strange? It would be like giving your kindergartner a terabyte of memory on their little kiddie iPad, right? You shouldn't do that, by the way. You shouldn't give kids that technology. I think only France has really been staunch enough against that to ban it. I think if you're under 3 in France, you actually can't watch television. It's actually harmful to brain myelination development, things like that. I think it's actually bad for you in general. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later when I get into the 11 steps to live to 100. So when you look at the concept of our brains, why is it so large? Why so much extra capacity? Did you know you can lose half of your brain and still live an apparently normal life? If anyone knows who Dr. Ben Carson is, he actually perfected the hemispherectomy for refractory seizures. One of my colleagues, I wish I could say that I actually work with him now, but I do not. He's retired. But I did have the privilege of meeting him. But that never really made sense to me, that you could lose half of your brain and still live a normal life, that the other half would just somehow take over. It's unbelievable. I actually met a man who I believed was from Argentina based on his last name. So I began speaking Spanish to him. I can read, write, and speak Spanish fluently. I'm not Hispanic, though, but that's another story. So I started talking to him, and his wife interrupts me and says, "Will you please speak English to my husband?" I said, "I apologize. I thought you were from Argentina." "We are from Argentina, but ever since the stroke, he can only speak English and not his native language." Isn't that interesting? We're going to talk about that a little bit more later as to why that is and why that can help you live longer and stronger. So could it be that the brain was designed for a lot longer lifespan? Could it be that we weren't designed to live to 79, or maybe even 89, or 109, or 149? Maybe we were designed to live to 1,009. Maybe we were designed to live forever. Well, these 3 people groups don't live forever, but they are the blue zones. They live a lot longer than the rest of us. Science isn't entirely sure why, but they've found some interesting concepts in their lifestyle. And these are not things related to medical technology. As much as I'd like to pat myself on the back and say it's all because of doctors, it's actually not. Most of the things that are going to extend your lifespan have to do with your choices and not the choices of the person taking care of you. We will first go to the land of the rising sun. That is Okinawa, Japan. Anyone been to Okinawa or Japan? A few of you. I have. I was a student missionary in Japan. I enjoyed how everything is really small. My theory as to why they live a lot longer is really a very simple concept called portion control. Does anyone understand that? Everyone tried to go on a diet, right? Anyone ever been to Claim Jumpers? That's like anti-portion control, right? I don't think I could finish like one of their appetizers. But in Japan, I went to eat and I said, well, I get the combo plate, right? So I got the combo plate because it had all these things that says green beans, soybeans, yams, all this other stuff. And I was like, wow, all this stuff's vegan too. That's even perfect. Miso soup, whatever. And they bring me this kid's lunch tray. And in one compartment, there's like 3 green beans. And another is like 2 little cubes of tofu arranged with a little sprig of, I don't know, parsley or some seaweed or kombu or whatever. And there's like 4 mushrooms over in this compartment. And so I finished that all up, and I'm like, oh, that's the appetizer. And I say, hey, where's the entree? I said, oh, the combo plate. That was the whole thing for like $15. It was literally an appetizer. I think we here in the West eat way, way, way big portions, like way bigger than we should. But anyway, in Japan, they live about 82, which is pretty good, which is 3 years longer than most of us here in the U.S. Their women live to 86, men live to 78, and one of the main reasons is they have about 20% of the #1 killer. Now, heart disease is not just the #1 killer in the first world anymore. Did you know that? If you look at New England Journal and you type in morbidity and mortality, it's like a 20-year study. It used to be in the third world that it was diarrhea illnesses, starvation, malaria, tuberculosis, stuff like that was at the tops of the list. But now it's heart disease for them too. They've come a long way in the wrong direction. in many ways, toward us, unfortunately. They also have about 25% of the most common cancers that afflict the Western world. They have plant-based diets, and they have a very strong cultural element. They have ikigai. Anyone know what ikigai is? It is the reason for which you get up in the morning. Your purpose, your motto, your theme, as we say. For Fumiyasu at 84, his ikigai is the Senior Olympics, the decathlon. His favorite event, the pole vault at 84. Any pole vaulters here? No one? They also grow a lot of their own food. They eat more volume of food, but they actually weigh less. They eat a lot of tofu, veggies, things that grow directly from their gardens is first-hand nutrition, not second. Can we cut some of the lights? I think it's a little bit tough to see some of the slides. But you have to promise not to go to bed. Serie Taguchi is 104 years old. When they interviewed him, they found him enjoying many benefits of the longevity equation. He was working in his own garden, getting fresh air, getting exercise, and getting what's been a very hot topic in the literature recently, vitamin D. Yes. Anyone know where the highest incidence of multiple sclerosis in the country is? It's here. Why? Not really sure. But it can be related to vitamin D. And now there's a big debate about if oral supplementation is actually the same as the sun. And what would you think? What would you think is the answer? Probably no, right? Now, to say that about osteoporosis and bone mineralization and stuff like that, probably not true. Vitamin D, yeah, that'd be good, whatever you just did. That's great. Then you can't see what? Oh, you can't see to right. Is there? Can we turn off this one, but leave the ones out here on? Is that possible? We get either off or super bright. Just turn this one right here, like these two right here off. So Serie was enjoying not only that, but enjoying a little nap, a little rest. And when he woke up, they started the interview. And one of the particular questions the interviewer had, they said, "Mr. Taguchi, why the red gloves?" And he said, "They're easy to find." They also have something called a moai in their culture. And the moai is more than a social club. It's a group of people who go through life together and help one another. How many of you have a group of people that you see 3 times a week or more? Same group of people. Anyone? I know, we're America. We don't, oh, wow, good for you. Good for you. That group of people helps not only socially, but even financially, spiritually. And they've found, as far as the equation goes, it does help you physically. Absolutely. That connection extends your lifespan. But unfortunately, Okinawa is starting to lose its longevity edge. And part of the downfall of the Okinawan culture is the enemy of all known society, the Golden Arches, yes. They have traded in their traditional lifestyles for a more Western update. I don't know, maybe the tomato and lettuce and sesame seeds might be good on this, perhaps. We'll now go to Silanus on the island of Sardinia. What country? Italy, right? Anyone been to Italy? I have. I've not been to Sardinia, though. I would love to go there. This is a small village on the island of Sardinia. You will meet people like Tonino, who is a shepherd at age 75, works from dawn till dusk, repairing fences, chopping wood, herding sheep. He works a full day after many of us have already retired. The Sardinian way finds the family at the center. This culture has a meal once a week for the entire extended family. How many of you do family reunions every year where everybody gets together? Anyone? Few people still. These guys do that every week. Can you imagine that? Every week. The patriarch here is 103. The interesting concept with Sardinia is that the male to female ratio of centenarians is different. Typically, who lives longer, men or women? Women, right? In fact, 4 times as many women reach 100 as men, but not in Sardinia. It's 1 to 1. Maybe I should move to Sardinia, right? They also have a very active and outdoor life. But there's a question, does geography help? A lot of people have wondered if Sardinia is a genetic incubator. Does anyone know what that means? It means you marry people on the island. Does that make sense? So the gene pool kind of stays the same. That's the same with Okinawa, too, which is also an island. Giuseppe, though, reveals that it's not only the physical aspects, but the mental aspects of their society. The interviewer said to Giuseppe at age 85, 20 years after most of us are retired, he gets up every morning, works a full day at work. Hopefully he won't eat this thing that he's caught by the leg, I'm hoping. But the interviewer asked, Giuseppe, don't you ever feel tired? And he says, I feel tired all the time. And he's like, well, why don't you stay home sometime? And Giuseppe's answer was, if I stayed home all day, then I'd be sick. Isn't that kind of the opposite for us? If we feel tired or sick, we stay home, right? But that's the opposite in this culture. I think the vast majority of us rust out and not burn out. In Sardinia, there's also other components. The grapes on Sardinia, at least in the antioxidant compounds, quercetin and resveratrol, have 300% the concentration as the mainland Italian grapes. So their soil seems to have a component in their longevity. But again, their isolated island and also genetic testing shows that 80% of the inhabitants are direct descendants of the original founders of the island. And unfortunately, also Sardinia is weakening in its longevity edge. Obesity now affects 10% of Sardinians. Does that seem like a large number to you? It's actually not very large. But when you consider that just a few decades ago, their percent obesity in their society was 0. Any guess as to where it is for us in the U.S.? Try 36%. Overweight is over 50%. That is correct. So in other words, obese, though, you have to be over 20% your ideal body weight. Whereas overweight, you can be up to 10%. So yes, the majority of the United States is now overweight. But as far as obesity, we're still at about 36%, which is very, very high even among first world nations. So Sardinia is now starting to succumb to the same lifestyle things that plague us in the United States. Also, another criticism by researchers is there's only 2,400 of them. Can you really make a conclusion with a sample size that small? So what about you? Any of you have your own gardens? Live in the country? Not many. So a lot of us are asking now, how does this affect me? Do I have a chance of living to 100? I don't have a garden. I live in the city, right? I've got a lot of smog around me. I live in the Pacific Northwest that gets no sunshine ever, right? Do I have even a chance to live to 100? Well, yes, you actually do. This is an area that has the worst air quality in the United States and perhaps the world. So from an environmental standpoint, it is not a great place to live. However, it is home to the longest, happiest group of seniors imaginable. Of course, this is Loma Linda, California, where you will meet people like Marge Chaton, who at 100 years old renewed her driver's license. She's in the middle of the city in the metropolitan areas. Hopefully she's not partaking of this in the sign behind her, but she's still remaining a very active life. Just to give you some feedback, Miss Chaton actually passed away at age 106. Her husband was 98. She was a nurse, he was a physician. And speaking of physicians, Dr. Frank Shearer, at age 100 at the time of the article, was the longest lived water skier on the planet. Anyone know a 100-year-old water skier? It'd be pretty amazing, wouldn't it? Actually, Dr. Shearer was from Washington State. Did you know that? Anyone know that? Yes, he was. He's outlived the average physician by many decades. In fact, some specialties of physicians are very short-lived. Neurosurgeons, 59. Yes, very sad, isn't it? That's devastating. I'm not a neurosurgeon. So sometimes when it is brain surgery, it's very stressful, I imagine. But I will share with you one of my professors. This is Ellsworth Wareham performing open heart surgery at age 91. Would you let a guy operate on you if he was 91? Anyone? Wouldn't you be a little worried of like a little shaky hand, maybe? I can tell you I was a medical student when I met Dr. Wareham, and his hand was rock steady. And all the surgeons wanted to have Dr. Wareham in on their cases because there was no complication that he hadn't already seen. He had been practicing as an open heart surgeon for longer than most of them had been alive. He was a vast, vast resource of experience, and his hand was very steady, even into his 90s. Of course, I am talking about our third blue zone, which is none other than the Seventh-day Adventists. The Adventists have some very, very long-lived players, like Lydia Newton at the time of the article was among the top 20 oldest people on the face of the earth. The article asks, is it good genes? Is it divine intervention? The author actually said this: God may or may not have something to do with it, but their religion does. So the Seventh-day Adventists are not isolated, and they're not a small sample size. There's about 20 million of them in the world. That is not a large religion, by the way, just for those of you who are wondering. Anyone know what the major world religions are? Christianity, or actually Catholicism, if you would be very specific. Catholicism is about 1 billion. Another large world religion? Islam is very large, yes? Buddhism and, someone said the last one? Hinduism, yes. So 20 million is actually fairly small compared to the Catholic Church, which is like billion, you know. Islam would be hundreds of millions. Hinduism, very similar. Buddhism. 20 million would be about the same size as like the Jews. Does that make sense? Judaism is about the same size. Does anyone know who the Sikh are? Anyone know who the Sikh are? Does anyone know anyone named Singh, whose last name is Singh, or Kaur? They're all Sikh, by the way. If it's Mr. Singh, he's Sikh. And he'll actually smile if you offer him like a vegan entree or something. Wow, really? So that's about the same size of those religions, just kind of as a reference. Many of the oldest of their number are not isolated, they are not in the country, and they come from all races. They are not genetic incubators at all. The common bond is their religion and lifestyle. So if you look at all three of these, they have plant-based diets, they don't smoke, generally they don't drink, they are family-oriented, and they have daily physical activity. This is Newsweek. Anyone heard of Newsweek? Everybody? Okay. I found this very intriguing. This is not the whole flow chart, by the way, and I must make a confession. I did add the arrow here, but it says you are female, flossing, positive attitude, the age of your mother, but here's a religious component. You are Seventh-day Adventist. I found this one very intriguing too. You started formal schooling after age 6. Have you noticed people always trying to get our kids to go to school earlier? But that's not associated with longevity. Did you know that? Actually, later, in many ways, is better. So this is after age 6. Have you heard that before? I have. That's another lecture. U.S. News and World Reports. Anyone heard of them? Sure. 11 health habits that will help you live to 100. So they've kind of taken the medical literature and kind of boiled it down for the layperson into 11 birthday candles to help you live to 100. But again, you don't want to live to 100 and be in a nursing home, right? You want to live to 100, you want quantity and quality, right? So these are the recipes for that. Number 1, those who retire expire. Period. End of story. Do not, I repeat, do not retire. And then what I mean by that is very aptly illustrated by a section of people that I work with every day. So I work with the geriatric population. I love the geriatric population. My grandmother has lived with me for 12 years in my home. So I love old people. I love old people. I'm going to talk about grandparents at the end. Don't let me forget. So my grandmother is a big part of my life, and all elderly people are. In my line of work, I see a lot of old people, but some of those old people are very healthy. Some of them are very, very sick. Same age. One group of them are my patients. The other group is the volunteers pushing them in the gurney. What do the volunteers have that those patients don't? Yes, they have purpose in their lives. They have meaning. They are continuing their ministry, so to speak. Even though they have quit working for money, right? They still improve the lives of others. So if you are retired, anyone retired here? Raise your hand. Retired? Continue doing something that is service-oriented. Continue your ikigai, so to speak, right? Your reason for getting up in the morning. Number 2, I found very intriguing. Anyone floss every day? Raise your hand. Oh, wow. You guys are all over it. Who would have known that a piece of string would be significant? Anyone know how this works? Anyone know why flossing is helpful for longevity? Anyone? What? Bacteria. Yes, that's correct. Bacteria where? I'll give you an illustration. If you haven't flossed for a long time, and then you floss, what happens? You bleed, right? You have gingivitis, inflammation of the gums, right? But the flossing did not create the inflammation. Does that make sense? It actually revealed that it was already inflamed. And so your mouth, yes, is one of the dirtiest parts of your body. And that inflammation in the gums allows that bacteria to penetrate into the bloodstream. And there, it heads to your coronary arteries. Creates inflammation, encourages plaque to lay down. That's the theory as to why flossing every day increases your longevity. The principal investigator of the flossing studies actually believes twice a day is significant, but he says he didn't have the power in his studies. The power means the actual numbers, right? He didn't have enough numbers of enrollees. But I find that very intriguing. And is flossing expensive? No, it's not. How long does it take to learn how to floss? 3 minutes, right? 5 minutes, not so much. My problem is keeping a hold of it. That little floss thing tends to like walk away all the time in my travel bag. Yeah, the what? Yeah, sometimes I find myself pulling the string out of my sock or something like that. You know what I mean? I'm sorry, I'm a guy. That's what I do sometimes. Number 3, when you look at what we call meta-analyses. A meta-analysis is a study that looks at hundreds of studies and boils it down to the bottom line. When you look at meta-analyses on exercise, you get statements like this. For every hour that you exercise, you will live that hour over again and 3 or more hours after that. Anyone here get 300 or 400% on their investments? Anyone? If you do, talk to me afterwards. I'll give you plenty of my time if you give me a little of your time. But 300 or 400% return on that investment. That's tremendous. Incredible, incredible amount of return. And instead of focusing on what type of exercise, what is most helpful is just doing the exercise consistently. They looked at the conventional wisdom, which was people who exercise 3 days a week for an hour each time. That's been the conventional wisdom. But then they thought, well, does it really make sense to just put it in 3 days? What if we spread it out into more? So they left the time the same, so 3 hours, and they divided that into 4 days a week instead of 3. Which group lived longer, 3 days a week or 4 days a week? 4, but at the same time, remember? Then they took the same 3 hours and went to 5. Which lived longer, 4 days a week or 5 days a week? 5, that's correct. Now they took it to 6. So again, the 6 days a week is only 30 minutes a day. Same time, but just spread over more days. 5 days a week or 6 days a week, which was better? 6. Then they looked at 7 days a week. No difference. So 6-1 seems to be your design. Anyone heard of that before? That's another presentation. But move around and do it a lot, right? People say, well, I got my heart rate up. Do I need to do this? Do I need to do the other thing? Just do what you're going to do, right? And do 2 things. Number 1, factor that is correlated to keeping your exercise program. Anyone know what it is? A buddy. A buddy. That's right. Look at that. They're like holding on. Yes. A buddy. So if you have a friend, right, the alarm goes off at 5 a.m., and if you're on your own, you know what you're going to do? Snooze, right? But if you know that Judy is waiting for you on the corner, like in about 15 minutes, text Judy. No. Then she won't respond on purpose to make sure you get there. So someone to keep you accountable is actually correlated to keeping your exercise program. Also, they found that people who do solo sports tend to keep them up than people who do team sports. Does that make sense? Team sports are great, but you got to get the number of people together. And if, Tom, Dick, and Harry can't play football or whatever, then you can't throw the ball to yourself, right? So those who do swimming, running, cycling as the sports they trained in when they were younger tend to keep that up for longer periods of time than those who play like basketball, football, things like that that require a number of people. Anyone know what the number one reason to stop your exercise program? Anyone know? Injury. Injury. So don't do things that are likely to cause you injury. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't do vigorous exercise. Someone like myself should do vigorous exercise. Hannah, you should do vigorous exercise. Young people should definitely do vigorous exercise safely, right? Safely. So don't do something that you're at high risk to injure yourselves. That's why my setting is actually 10 kilometers a day, 6 times a week. The reason why I do that is 10 kilometers a day is roughly, anyone know? 6 miles, right? So if I do about 6 miles times 6, that keeps me at about 35 miles a week. And that is right when your orthopedic injuries will start to rise if you run. So I keep it right under that. Not to say that I always get in the 10 kilometers, right? Like when I fly east, I actually lose a day. So my little program, my little app says, you didn't do anything today, lazy. But it's because I went across the date line, right? So move around. Those are very important studies because they're based on large amounts of studies. Another meta-analysis, I'll give you an example, is cigarette smoking. What do you think cigarette smoking does to your longevity? It shortens it, right? Every cigarette you smoke cuts 10 minutes off your life. And that does not include the time you used to smoke the cigarette, right? So maybe you lose that too, right? Because how productive were you while you were smoking? Probably not that productive, right? Another interesting study, this is an Australian study, it looked at people greater than age 25, and they found that if you watched television after age 25, every hour of television that you watched, you shortened your lifespan by 22.8 minutes. Now, what were you watching during that hour, too? Probably not like PBS or Discovery Channel, right, or whatnot. Probably not helpful for you. So that may be an hour and a half that you shortened yourself. So they don't call it the boob tube for nothing, right? Not good for you in general. It's not good, not that it's evil, right? But the actual medium itself makes your brain waves change. Does anyone know that? Like the way your brain is functioning. Like right now, my brain is beta all the way. I'm like going through the next slide. I'm going through the studies. I'm going through everything. Some of you might be alpha. Some of you kind of snoozing in the back might be alpha. No, there's nobody snoozing in the back. But you know the person like you're talking to as you're driving down the freeway? And you're like, oh, the exit was just right there. You were alphaing, right? You were more relaxed. You were not focused. And what television does to you is it switches you to alpha very quickly. It makes you more susceptible to suggestion, right? Ever heard of subliminal messages? You're very, very open to those when you're in alpha. Alpha is like when you're getting a massage. Anyone get a massage? Right? I'm a massage therapist. Do you know that? And I had this little plan. No, I'm not doing that tonight. So I had this plan where I put out free sample. So I'd work on them for about 5 minutes, get them all nice and relaxed, right? And after about 5 or 10 minutes, I say, we can keep going. It's only $45 an hour. Sounds good, right? They're in alpha. They're in alpha. Not everybody, but most people after about 5 or 10 minutes. Well, hey, listen. Got to give them a chance to try it. And people said no. Some people said no, for the record. Not everybody said yes. So that is the basis of meta-analyses, when you look at things that are large amounts of studies. Number 4, How many people eat breakfast in the morning? Oh, wow, look at all these people. You guys are so healthy. But it's not just breakfast, but eating a fiber-rich grain, a whole grain. What they've found is when you eat whole grains in the morning, it not only controls your blood sugar for that meal, but for the rest of the day. Did you know that? And not only does it do that, it extends your lifespan. Incredible. So, when you're thinking about, whole wheat bread or white bread, what do you want? Whole wheat bread, right? Like brown rice or white rice. What do you want? Brown rice, right? I love brown rice. I mean, I like white people, but not white rice, right? You want to eat the whole grain. Has anyone ever heard of enriched? Who's heard of enriched grains? Enriched. So, is enriched good for you? So if I reached in your wallet, sir, and I lifted out $20 and you caught me, you said, hey, you're taking $20. And I said, okay, here's 4 back. You're enriched. Would you feel enriched? No, you'd feel robbed, wouldn't you? But that is what they do when they enrich grains. They take out 20 vitamins, minerals, nutrients, fiber, and they put back 4. Anyone know what 4? Thiamine, niacin, riboflavin, and a mineral. What's the mineral? Iron. That's right. Do you feel enriched? Or do you feel robbed? I feel kind of robbed, actually. Give me the whole grain, right? So this is the Achilles heel for physicians, right? Sleep at least 6 hours. How many of you sleep 7 or 8 hours? Wow, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I don't know if I ever got more than 6 hours of sleep when I was in residency. I worked 135 hours one week. Anyone work a 60-hour work week? Anyone ever work a 70-hour work week? 80, 90, 100. All right, I've got you. That's hard. It's not good for you, right? I actually fell asleep standing up one time. And I've got people's lives in my hands? Crazy, right? So it is not good for you if you are sleep deprived. Anyone know how you can tell you're sleep deprived? Anyone know? How many of you always remember your dreams? Always remember your dreams? Oh, wow. That's no good. How many of you never remember your dreams? That can be a clue. That means you're not waking up during REM. You know what REM is? Rapid eye movement, right? Rapid eye movement. That is when you are dreaming, right? And if you wake up during REM, you will remember the dream. So if you never remember your dreams, that can be a hint that you're sleep deprived. Anyone here always need their alarm clock to get up for work? Few people. You might be sleep deprived. If you always need your alarm clock in order to get up, you may be sleep deprived. How many people here on your day off like to sleep in? How many of you on your day off sleep in more than an hour and a half than normal? You might be sleep deprived. So those are the 3 factors, right? You know, if you find yourself setting your alarm and then just taking your phone and putting it across the room as the 2nd alarm and have the wake-up call as the 3rd alarm, you might be sleep deprived. Or you might be a professional like me. That's like you can never be late. In my line of work, there was a group of physicians one time. They were tired of people being late. So they had an anatomic clock installed in the ER. So you'd clock in and out with the anatomic clock. And for every minute you were late, you paid the off-going physician that you relieved $1,000 a minute. No one was late after that. Because you'd call and say, my tire is blown. Hey, no problem. I need a new deck. It's okay. So they were never late after that. And I think they had some exceptions, like for actual, if you had a heart attack on the way to work or something like that. But it was automatic. You had to actually get approval from the person who you were relieving, and they could either say yes or no, because it was an automatic transfer on payroll. So they found that it's not only the amount of time, but when you go to sleep. They have found that the earlier you go to sleep, the better serotonin, melatonin, growth hormone, cortisol curves your body produces. That makes sense, I hope, intuitively, right? Because before artificial lighting, when do you think people went to bed? Well, shortly after the sunset, unless you wanted to burn your oil and burn your wood, right? Be a poor man, right? You generally went to bed when the birds did, right? And when did people get up? Yes, when they had light. Does that make sense? And what they've found is when they look at night shift workers, they would expect their circadian rhythms to be opposite of day shift workers, but they're not. They're just blunted day rhythms. So don't think that anyone is a night owl, because you're not. Your hormonal and circadian rhythms tell you that you were born for the day. You're not born to work at night. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people who have to work at night. People in my field, do emergencies just happen during the day? Of course not, right? So we have to work at night. But you should be very cautious as to how you do that and to limit that so that you don't have increased mortality. Number 6, I hope this isn't a big surprise, eat whole foods. How many of you enjoy taking supplements? Anyone like supplements? Any supplements? Sure. Multi-billion-dollar industry, right? Now, I'm not saying the supplements are evil, but I'm going to share with you an interesting Scandinavian study that looked at smokers. If you smoke, you're going to get what? Lung cancer, right? Lung disease, emphysema, COPD, but this particularly looked at lung cancer. And so they divided it not into 2 groups, because typically it's the control group and the experimental group, right? There's 3 different groups. The control group, what did they do? They just smoked, right? And then they measured their incidence of lung cancer. The second group took antioxidant-rich foods and ate them as well as smoking. And those foods were vitamin A rich, C, E, and selenium, right? The third group took the same amount as the food group, but in the form of supplements. Group number 1, the control group, what do you think they developed? Lung cancer, right? Group number 2, the smoker and the food group, did they develop less, the same, or more than the control group? Less, yes. And the third group with the supplements, less, the same, or more? More. They actually had to stop the study partway through. Because when you do a study that's related to disease or mortality, you have to pass it through an IRB, which is like a board. Like you have to do something ethical, right? So if I know something that can either help you live longer or reduce disease, I cannot blind you anymore in the study. Does that make sense? From an ethical standpoint, I must reveal it to all the groups. I have to unblind the experiment and say, hey, don't smoke. It gives you lung cancer. Or, hey, don't take those supplements. Instead, eat the carrot. Eat the orange. Have the Brazil nuts, right? I have to unblind the findings so that you now can decide. Does that make sense? Now, why did the supplement group have worse mortality? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. There are certainly mixed reviews, though, about supplementation. And this is the way I put it. When you look at supplements, they are in a very delicate balance. Vitamins and minerals, right? Have you ever read on multivitamin it says 100% of all the vitamins and minerals your daily requirement? Have you ever seen that? 100%, you get 100% of your daily requirement. Has anyone ever seen that? But how do they know it's all the vitamins and minerals, right? In 1905, all was vitamin A, right? That's it. Vitamin A, right? The first vitamin discovered, vitamin A. Right? So 100% of everything was 1. And there are things that they don't even know how much genistein do you need a day? How many isoflavones do you need? How many flavonoids do you need? How much beta, gamma, and alpha carotenoids do you need, right? I mean, how much of that do you need? How do you know, right? And things are in flux, right? Vitamin D, that's changed recently. Did you know that? They used to say it was 400 international units. Anyone know what it is now? It's close, that's right. It's 800, it's 1,000. Some people are saying 2,000 now. Go up and up and up and up, But that's another lecture. But just to give you a hint, if you come to my backyard, and I live in Federal Way, I don't live very far away from you guys, and I have a fenced-in backyard, and I say, listen, I want you to house sit, and, it's springtime, enjoy. So you lay out in the sun in my backyard in all your glory, in your birthday suit, and you are Caucasian, right? You're not like me. I'm kind of tannish, olive-skinned, right? So you're Caucasian. How much vitamin D will you make in an hour? Not all day, just an hour. And springtime in Seattle. How many international units? Remember, the entire day's supply is 400, or some say 800 or 1,000 now. What do you think you'll make? How much? Your whole body's exposed. I'll just say that. Wow, that's very, very good. No one ever guesses that high. It's 10,000 units an hour. So in my mind, how in the world is 400 the entire day's supply? Does that make sense? That doesn't make physiologic sense, right? If your body can crank out 10 grand in an hour, that would say you probably need more, right, rather than less. But that's another lecture. That's another lecture. So the concept of vitamins and minerals is really a moving target. And the way they decide what the daily recommended allowance is, what they do is they take a group of asymptomatic individuals. They draw their blood levels and they go out 2 standard deviations. That's how they decide. I'm just being honest, right? This is the same thing with cholesterol. Who decides what normal cholesterol is, right? In a country where the #1 cause of death is heart disease, I wouldn't go with the norms. I wouldn't go with the average asymptomatic population. Does that make sense? Because if you want the average death, then have the average cholesterol level. But you don't want that. You want to be optimal, right? You want to live to your greatest potential. So I don't believe that those sorts of ways of finding out things is really science. I think that's actually voodoo, in my opinion. And so what you need to look at is not just symptomatics, right? People who have no symptoms, does that mean they're healthy? I feel fine. Is that the definition of health? Right? Anyone ever heard of the silent killer? What's that? Blood pressure. That's right. Hypertension. Do you have to have symptoms to be unhealthy? No. I've seen people with blood pressures of 220 over 160 and they have no symptoms till they die of a stroke or a heart attack, right? Very serious. So I don't believe that the way they designate these things actually accurate. And that goes into vitamins and nutrients and things like that. Symptoms aren't necessarily what you can hang your hat on, because even if you supplement, it actually throws the equilibrium off. A common mineral that most women have to supplement with at some point is what? Okay, sure, iron, right? Iron's a pretty common one. You know that they don't recommend you taking a supplement with your multivitamin with iron anymore. Do you know why? Remember the Flintstones vitamins? Remember those, right? The kids were overdosing. And when you overdose on these little vitamins, you know what kills you? The iron, right? But they've also found if you supplement with iron without needing to, you actually reduce your longevity. So, but many times if women have heavy menses, they have iron deficiency anemia, they're on iron. But if you supplement with iron, then your zinc absorption goes down. And then if you supplement with zinc, your copper absorption goes down, right? So you're basically playing, musical chairs. You're tasting your tail sometimes when you supplement, because you need to supplement in the right ratios. Does that make sense? And that's the concept. If you want to supplement, my personal opinion is get a juicer, right? Because the only thing that's going to be missing when you juice is what? Fiber, right? Do you need fiber? Yes. But at least from a vitamin mineral sort of standpoint, you're remaining somewhat in the balance, but you're concentrating it. Because it's tough to eat like 11 carrots at a sitting, right? Or like 3 heads of kale, right? It's hard to eat that much. But if you make kale chips, I'm there, right? Especially if you put some brewer's yeast on them, nutritional yeast. So eat whole foods is what we recommend. The other concept recently that's come out is the nearer the vine, the greater the blessing. You know what that means? That means if you have your own food and you pick something, right? When should you eat it? Right? Now the concept comes with studies that have actually looked at like lettuce, like greens and stuff like that. What they found is that even in a week or two, they lose 33% of their nutrients. How much of the produce do you think is a week or two old in the store? All of it. How about from your store, your garden? Do you know how old it is? Do you know when it was harvested? Yes, you do, right? Can you control if it's GMO or organic or pesticides that you put on it? Sure you can, right? You absolutely can. So that is the concept now with foods, is to try to get it as near to harvest as possible. Now, that's not always possible, but I will say, does anyone have access to a farmer's market? Anyone have access to a farmer's market here? There you go. You have access to that. Could you theoretically grow your own food? No? Is there a possibility? Are there community gardens near you or anything like that? Anyone have those things? A few people? A few people? Farmers markets? I have Marlene's Market. I'm not paid by Marlene, by the way, but she sources from a lot of the local sort of growers, and I get all of my grandmother's stuff from that. This is just a little aside about Whole Foods. My grandmother failed her swallow test. Does anyone know what that means? That means NPO. What does that mean? Nothing by mouth. So how is she going to have to be fed? G-tube, right? I mean, there's J-tubes and all kinds of other things, and I don't need to go into that. But she's fed by tube. So that's really sad, right? Actually, in a way, it's not. Because now what can I feed her? Whatever I want. That's right, I heard that from the back. Whatever I want. So what do the dietitians want to feed her? And yes, or actually it's Diabetisure. Anyone guess what the first 4 food ingredients are? Corn syrup, close. It's not high fructose corn syrup, but number 2, it was actually not. It's soy protein isolate. Actually, that's 3rd, but what was the 2nd ingredient? Not aspartame, canola oil. Do you know who invented canola oil? Canada. It's canola, eh? Right? Canola, right? No, it is. You can look that up. I'm not kidding. I didn't make that up. It was made by Canadians. Now, they claim that it's not GMO, that it is hybridization. That's how they created it. I'm not so sure about that. So that's the 3rd ingredient. Anyone know what the 4th ingredient is? So we got corn syrup, canola oil, soy protein isolate, and puree from dehydrated peas and green beans. I asked the dietitian, I said, be honest, you want to try some of this? She's like, oh no, I don't want to eat that. I was like, wait, are you going to give it to my grandma who's sick? I said, I don't want to give her this stuff. I said, how about we make a deal? I will create the same calories, protein, carbs, fiber, nutrients, whatever, but I will make it with avocados. I will make it with Vega protein powder, with, fiber-wise, with, fresh pressed juices. Is that acceptable? She's like, oh yeah, I actually use Vega myself. And I don't endorse Vega, but it's a very high-end organic protein powder. However, the other dietitian, when I asked her that, she's like, oh no, you shouldn't do that. I know you're a physician, Dr. Riesenberger, but this is not your department here. You need to let us take care of this and balance it out. Guess how long she lasts on the Diabetisure? 2 weeks before she was hospitalized. And when she started using it, she became nonverbal. And she got all this residue that would cake in her mouth. We'd scrape chips of it out. Nasty. Nasty. Yes. That's nasty. That's just one word. It's gross, right? When I replaced it, right, what I started doing after that, and again, I'm not telling for you guys to do that or whatever. I'm just saying that I'm a little bit more aware about nutrition since I have my master's in preventive medicine. So I created my own formula for Grandma, giving her, the other issue she struggled with was a lot of nausea with this stuff. So I gave her little ginger root with each feeding, burdock, cranberry, and when I say cranberry, I'm not talking about like the cranberry cocktail. We're talking like legit cranberry. Like fresh pressed, cold pressed, non-GMO organic cranberry. Like straight. So she was getting cranberry all the time. I gave her some kefir. Anyone know what kefir is? She was getting like wiped out with antibiotics all the time. So kefir is kind of a yogurt drink, kind of an old Middle Eastern sort of stuff. And I used goat kefir for a little while. But then I transitioned her back to vegan, like kale, you know, burdock, collard greens, all kinds of good stuff. So now she talks again. She can tell you. I said, Grandma. She's like, help me. I said, what's wrong, Grandma? Pee-pee. I said, do you need to be changed? Yes. I said, well, just say Rebecca. Can you change it? Rebecca. I'm like, wow, that's great. Now, she's not getting up and walking yet, but at least she can communicate. Again, she's 93, going to turn 93 in a couple months. So again, that's my little push about whole foods, right? I don't want frankenfood. I want whole foods, right? Does that make sense? The more you mess with the food, the worse it gets. The crinklier the wrapper, the worse it is for you, right? If you look at the section of the grocery store that has the lowest margin of profit, does anyone know what area that is? It's the produce. Anyone know what product in the grocery store has the highest profit margin? Soda. The soda in the can is less than the can. Did you know that? It's 1,000% profit for soda. That's why Coke and Pepsi own everything. Did you know that? They own KFC. They own Taco Bell. They own everything. Maybe they own you. Hopefully not, right? Not yet. So eat whole foods. Also, number 7, it's not always what you're eating, but what's eating you, right? Ever heard of it's not what goes into your mouth, but what comes out of your mouth that kills you? And they found that to be true. In fact, certain personality types have higher mortality. Type A personality, anyone heard of type A personality? That would be someone like me, right? Someone who's very ambitious, very social, very organized, very leader type, right? But the good news is it's not timeliness, it's not organization, it's not leadership. It's 2 factors of the type A personality that kill them. Anyone know what those 2 factors are? Not necessarily stress. Worry's not good for you, though. Stress actually is kind of a 2-edged sword. If you look at performance curves, you need some stress, right? Anyone heard of the UC schools, UCLA, UC Berkeley? One of them has no grades. I don't know, that was just a little too much for me. I was offered it. No, there's no grades. It's pass or fail. It's pass or fail. No, it's pass or fail. It's pass or fail. So I was thinking, I think I need a little bit more fire under me than that. And then some of them were kind of a little different. I mean, one of the schools had a guy who came to class naked. And it took them over a year to say, yeah, you can't come to class naked. Because they said, well, what if this is his personal expression, right? And then after that, he came in a loincloth. So anyway, I didn't want to go that far, but I didn't want extra super stress, you know? So I chose one that's kind of more in the country. There are more bicycles on campus than vehicles, so it was really, really nice. So you do need some stress. So that wasn't the component. If you heard of eustress, right, good stress, you probably need some deadlines. But anyway, the 2 components were intolerance and hostility. Right? It's okay to be opinionated, but when someone disagrees with you, right, don't do that. It's okay for you to be on time, but what if someone else is late? Right? Don't get hostile, right? Don't get hostile. You're not built for hostility. That's bad for you. In fact, they looked at studies of people who lost their temper. Even for a second, they snapped. And for the next several hours, their risk of fatal heart attack went up 300%. It's not good for you. Don't blow your cool. You may blow your life. Number 8, I must confess, the article did not list it this way. It says live like a Seventh-day Adventist, but it's okay. I'm just going to invite you to be a Seventh-day Adventist. That's okay. Now, the reason why I say that is from a very, very scientific standpoint. If I were to tell you that I had a supplement and you had to take it twice a day, or 3 times a day, or 8 times a day, and it was guaranteed to extend your lifespan by 10 years. Anyone remember what Okinawa enlists to? 82, right? That's 3 years. Average North American, 79. Average age matched controlled Seventh-day Adventist compared to that person, 89. That's insane, right? If I told you I sold a green beanie and you had to spin it 10 times a day and you lived 10 years longer, everybody would buy my beanie. I'm serious. They would buy the beanie. So from a simple scientific standpoint, there's something going on with this blue zone. And the neat thing is that the blue zone is not exclusive, right? As Okinawans are, right? As Sardinians are. This is a fairly heterogeneous population, if you know what that means. It means a mixed bag, right? You don't have to be Asian or Italian or whatever. You can be many different races. An interesting concept, there's one race that has much more high blood pressure, much more diabetes. Anyone know? African Americans, right? Anyone know, incidentally, who has the most diabetes of all the people groups in the U.S.? Native Americans. Anyone know what tribe? Pima, right? Pima, the Pima Indians. They have lots of diabetes. So anyway, the African Americans, sorry? There you go. Yeah, the worst thing you can do for someone is give them everything, right? Especially if you give them things that are bad, like fire water, right? So when you look at the African American population, a lot more hypertension, a lot more diabetes, but when they become Seventh-day Adventists, those actually go away. Did you know that? It's very, very intriguing, very intriguing. So I won't go into that very much, but number 9, have you ever noticed the people that get really old? Okay, Grandma, I'm going to be back. I'll be back later. Okay, supper's at 5. Well, I'm not going to be back till 6:30. Supper's at 5, right? Okay, now it's time for you to go to bed, right? Or we're all going to take a nap now. You notice how they don't like you messing with the program? Yeah. There's a reason for that. If you have the same time you get up, go to sleep, eat your meals, exercise, you live longer. Your body thrives on regularity, right? Someone like myself who travels 250,000 miles a year, I'm going to die. Right? Early. That's not good. But you know what I say to my audiences? I'm willing to sacrifice a little of my longevity to extend yours. Right? And that being said, there's a very interesting concept they looked at in the States. They found a spike in fatal heart attacks during the spring and during the fall. And when they looked at the data again, they found that it wasn't true for the state of Arizona or half of the state of Indiana. Anyone know why Arizona wasn't affected by this? No, it's not their diet. They've got the heart attack grill there. So yeah, they're not really that helpful. There's no what there? No daylight savings. Did you know that just that hour of change is not just uncomfortable, it is deadly. The heart attack literature is now clear. It increases the risk of fatal heart attack. Just the time change. Now, if you look at the medical literature on auto accidents and auto fatalities, that's always been present for a long time. That makes sense, right? You're up an hour earlier, like, right? You're going to make a mistake. But they've not known this phenomena with your heart. So I'm not saying you have to all live in Arizona, right? But just prepare yourself for the time change. Does that make sense? You can slowly prepare yourself because that time change, that 1 hour rude awakening is very bad for you. Have you ever noticed you feel bad for weeks after that? Anyone ever notice that? It's not good for you. Well, maybe you adapt very quickly. I don't know. Or maybe you just ignore it. I'm not sure. So be a creature of habit. Number 10, stay connected. We talked about the moai, right? I'm going to share with you something else. Anyone have a sister? Raise your hand. Wow, that's good. So if you stay connected with your sister, you have a lower lifetime incidence of depression and you will live longer. Did you know that? No, I'm dead serious. Now, why the data didn't work out for a brother, I don't know. Maybe we're not as sympathetic or empathetic. Maybe we don't listen as much. I don't know. But if you have a sister, stay close. Your sister will take care of you and you will live longer. But I want to share This was just published 3 months ago in the Journal of Evolution and Human Behavior, in the Berlin Aging Study. You can look it up. December 2016. They found that grandparents, anyone a grandparent here? Grandparents who were not primary, but partial caretakers for their grandchildren. Any grandparents watch their grandkids every once in a while? Raise your hands. You will live longer. You have a 30% decreased mortality compared to grandparents who never watch their grandkids. But you know what I find very intriguing? Because the journal tried to say, well, this is an evolutionary basis to continue the genetic line. They actually disproved their own conclusions at the end of their study, because they found that even non-relatives that did it had an advantage as well. And even people with no children who cared for others had the advantage also. You seeing the ikigai there? Amazing. Number 11 is based on the longest prospective trial known in the history of mankind. They followed these kids like 70 to 80 years to discern what personality trait would make them live longer. The personality trait was conscientiousness. Conscientiousness, I find that very intriguing. Now, some people try to say, well, they were conscientious to keep their doctor's appointments. No, I don't give myself that much credit. If you're conscientious, that means you follow through. You say what you mean what you say, you don't take shortcuts, right? You're thorough in what you do. Yes, exactly. It's almost a character trait, isn't it? It's almost a moral trait, in a sense. But they found that this conscientiousness was not just correlated with longevity. It was correlated with a happier marriage, correlated with less jail time, correlated with better success academically, better financial success. Amazing. A lot of people are asking me at this point, so what's the secret, right? What's the secret? What's the magic bullet, right? Give me the supplement. Give me the E equals MC squared of longevity, right? That's what people want. They want the unifying theory. So people will say, well, it's got to be your diet, right? Have you heard people say that? Well, that's all what you eat. Well, even though tomorrow night I am going to be talking about nutrition, and I'm a strong believer in nutrition, it is not all nutrition, right? The reason I say that, people might say, well, it's because you're vegetarian. Just in the spirit of full disclosure, the latest Adventist health study shows that 39% of Adventists are vegetarian. That's low in North America. That's the lowest it's ever been. Even if you throw in the people who are semi-vegetarian, it's only 11% more. That's like half. So half of that blue zone is not vegetarian, or less than half. Also, anyone know a major world religion that's vegetarian? Yeah, Hindus and Buddhists. Did you know that? If you're a Buddhist monk, you're not just vegetarian, you're vegan. Did you know that? But they don't live longer. Right? Not saying that vegetarianism is wrong or bad. I think it's very healthy to eat a plant-based diet. But it's not all that, right? What about exercise? Anyone know who Jim Fixx was? Was he into exercise, yes or no? Yes. Did he drop over dead, yes or no? Yes. So is it all exercise? No, right? Certainly it does help, and I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's not all that. What about genetics, right? Isn't it just your good genes? Well, that's not true. My grandfather, he passed away at 82. He passed away, though, in my home, in his own bed, no nursing home, no disability, with an open Bible at his easy chair. Good way to go, if you're going to, right? So it's not all genetics. See, he didn't live to 109. Grandpa told you, right? So it's not all genetics. What about optimism? What about the thinking? Have you ever heard of the placebo effect? Who's heard of the placebo effect? Can't you just think yourself well? Isn't that possible? Well, it is not entirely that. Because there's a lot of people that are very happy and positive, but they don't necessarily live forever. Well, what about faith, right? Because one of the blue zones was a faith. Do you think being religious is enough. Bless you. It is not enough, right? Because people will say, well, the Seventh-day Adventists, they don't smoke, they don't drink caffeine, right? Would that play a role, perhaps? But did you know there's another faith group that doesn't smoke or drink or use caffeine? Ah, the Mormons, right? And in the sake of full disclosure, those of you who would like to research the Mormon longevity literature, the principal investigator is Bigelow, a man out of UCLA. However, the Mormons are not on CNN and Anderson Cooper and Oprah, right? Because they don't have the data. They don't live longer. However, if you are white, male, and a high priest in the Mormon religion, you live 15 years longer. But that's like a small, real small group, right? So we want an advantage for all people, right? That's why they're not part of it. So it's not just the no smoking, no drinking, no caffeine, even though I think that's great. Here's my proposal. When you want to see why a people group is living longer, don't look at the things in common, look at the things that are different. Does that make sense? Look at the things in that blue zone that are different from all others, not the ones that are shared. Because when you're pointing at the things that are shared, why don't the other people live longer? Does that make sense? And that's just from a logical standpoint. Also, yes, is being vegetarian good? Yes, is it good not to smoke or drink? Yes, is it good not to use caffeine? Yes, yes, yes. But it's not just one thing. It's a synergy. Does that make sense? It's not a fad. It's a lifestyle, right? It's a way of living. It's not the things that you do on New Year's, right, that are going to really take the toll on you. It's the things you do every day, day in and day out, the consistent things that you do. And also, if you want to study into this more, look at the differences in these blue zones from all other people on the earth. I also believe we're going to find it's a lot more between our two ears than we think. Anyone know what psychoneuroimmunology is? It's a very, very new field, psychoneuroimmunology. They're looking at the way, not just how you think, but your emotions and how they affect the immune system. They've looked at pregnant mothers and looked at emotions and the effect physiologically on the fetus. And there's no hormonal connection, there's no neuronal connection, and they're trying to figure out why, when the mother feels happy, the baby like really revs up. And when she's sad, the heart rate is depressed, the movement is depressed. What is going on? What is the connection? I believe there's a lot more than meets the eye in the eye of faith, so to speak. So I believe when you look at the human organism, when you look at all this data, you see that there is a design for the best possible quality and quantity of life, but that design is dependent on choices that you make. One of my favorite passages in the ancient literature says, "Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers." Coming back to the initial premise of our title, is it just superficial to look for the fountain of youth? Are we just vain when we try to touch away the wrinkle, when we smooth away the gray hair? Are we just putting up a front? Or could it be something else? Could it be that we seek to live forever, and we seek to live forever young? Because that is something that is a part of the human existence. I believe that this word of wisdom says it all, that we were designed with eternity in our hearts. And that is my wish and prayer for each one of you, that in your search for longevity, you would find not only life, but you would find it more abundantly. Thank you very much.